Hey everybody, it's a Mad Master here. I'm doing a fourth video today and just started thinking that some of these things with Trump are kind of pretty beyond defense at this point. Now I know this kind of contradicts my previous video about this, but I'm just going to put this to a kind of what I believe is a problem with this whole notion. If this is actually true of what he did, as far as giving nuclear secrets, if they were actually nuclear secrets to the Saudi government or officials. So now it's hypocrisy to say that Obama or, well, especially Bush should get away with any kind of the filleting and basically colluding with the Saudi government on many different things, and just a lot of what had happened with that. So I know that the Saudis have given him a lot of money, Trump, and they're kind of in a deep financial relationship with him. This is something that should alarm anybody, and I'm just going to say that about this situation. Now, it's one of those situations that they have this, it's kind of like with certain things that have been, if you focus on one thing long enough, let's say certain people or certain situations, you're going to find something wrong that they do or whatnot. And there's been so much of a focus on Trump by the establishment and the law enforcement and so forth that they finally found something. If they did, then they did. And no one can kind of get away with this kind of like backwards rationalization, mental gymnastics that they usually do about this type of stuff. I mean, let's say he didn't do it. That would be the greatest gift ever to the right or the Republicans at this point, is if he didn't do this stuff. But if he did, oh boy, this is a bad thing. This is I don't trust the FBI. I don't trust the intelligence alphabet soup agencies any much more than I can throw them off a cliff, because I think they're pieces of shit. They're out to perpetuate misinformation, tyranny, and so forth, and they have for 60 plus years. I mean, look at what has happened in the third world because of the CIA, for example. I mean, Operation Phoenix, just all these things that they've done. They've killed for this notion of America that's just not even true in the first place. And people justify it because of communism, but you don't fight communism by supporting other dictators just because they let the money flow to your corporate buddies that elect you. That's not how it works. You don't fight communism with that. You fight communism by, honestly, in my opinion, how they could have done better is by going with more of the non-aligned countries, and the whole idea that maybe we'll give some crumbs to the people. This is what the Kaiser did, in the 1890s with Germany. He's like, well, the communists are trying to take over, so let's do a little, let's meet them halfway on a couple of things we can do for them to give these people, medical, rights to medical stuff without having to be rich or whatever, things like that, like the national healthcare system that is in Germany. So that's kind of one of those things that you can think about with regards to that. Now, I have mixed feelings about capitalism. I don't think it's a sustainable system, especially the consumerist brand of capitalism that we live with. I don't necessarily believe that we're going to become like Venus in a couple of years or something like that, but I think it's just unsustainable in the long run in general. So, but anyways, I'm not going to go into that today, but I'm going to go into this Trump thing. So, apparently there may have been nuclear secrets exchanged or whatnot, and that's just a terrifying thought. Not because I'm scared of Saudi nuking America or something like that, but it's just like, I really thought that I knew that Trump was corrupt, but I didn't know he was corrupt in that way. That's more of like a Reagan, Bush, both Bush's way. And it's just really gross and kind of pathetic that if this is true, I'm just saying, I given the benefit of the doubt to this situation because there's been so many lies that have been told. But if it is true, and it's obviously we don't know what's true or what's not anymore with regards to our world. A lot of the time they'll lie and then obfuscate and then say something else that's completely opposite. Just like my video today about the virus crisis, it's like, whoa, we're not going to require people to do this or that anymore, which is totally contradicting like what they used to say about what you're supposed to do and what's right and wrong and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I feel about that. So now in regards to what this means for the Trump movement, the MAGA people and all that, it's kind of a huge setback for them if this is true, because I mean, a lot of them worship Trump in this way that is like he can do no wrong, or when he does wrong, it's all the troll people. Like today I watched his WEF speech. It was pretty funny because like I know that he was criticized for going there in the first place, but he really was doing a troll job in that speech. So I think that was a point that they were trying to make, and I think he was doing it actually. So it was true. But this whole thing, the Saudi, the corruption that Trump has. Now I'm going to say that Trump doesn't have the corruption, like it's just corruption, period, that these government, Pelosi and her insider trading stuff with her husband, or Biden and the Ukraine thing with his son, all that stuff. None of these people have a record of a clean record. I mean, even probably Rand Paul and Bernie Sanders have some skeletons in their closet too, and I know that for a fact, but probably not as much than other people, or some of these people don't. Politicians are just sleazy, corrupt pieces of shit in general, and Trump is no exception. I mean, this is evidence and I'm jumping the gun, but I'm just saying, because some of the people that I follow or watch have come forward and kind of given the facts about this whole thing in a way that is believable, that this might be very probable to be true. So I don't like it. I wish he was, I wish this hadn't happened, but I know for a fact that Trump has given a blind eye to the Saudi regime. They had all those gifts, like wasn't there like a crystal ball or something that they gave him and all this shit? He's given a blind eye to that. And then, I know Trump supporters and MAGA people will be like, they'll do some mental gymnastics, like, well, it's just so they know he can put him in line. It's like, no, I remember I was fucking there, 9/11, watching that shit live and hearing it on the phone. I worked at a call center at the time. People were calling in and saying the World Trade Center has been attacked. I heard these people talk about it live as it happened. I saw it. And what happened during 9/11 is I worked at this call center. It was for Palm. Remember Palm Pilots? I did a customer service for the company. It was through this other company. That company is now not defunct, but I think Palm is defunct. But I remember the calls I got, and they were like, "Oh, the plane attacked the World Trade Center." I remember the fear, and I think obviously the Bush administration, had foreknowledge or whatever. It's been proven, the August 5th PDB, that they had foreknowledge. Now, whether or not it was criminal negligence or an actual conscious thing that they did, we'll be debating that for years. I happen to believe the latter to some extent, but the fact, this is just a betrayal. This is betrayal of the truther movement. Think about it. It's like, we know that a lot of the truther movement has to do with, Saudi involvement in 9/11 and all that stuff, and how they turned a blind eye to these people doing all this stuff, and it was all part of this plan and all this shit. And it's a betrayal. Alex Jones should be furious, for example. Like, if this is true, if he actually was giving nuclear secrets to the Saudis, because this is a whole part and parcel of some of the truther movement, is conspiracy movement, that this is the fact that we're supporting this regime who is Islamo-fascist. I'm not going to use that. I don't like that term necessarily, just because it's kind of a loaded term. But anyways, They're basically religious extremists. Not basically, they are. That we turn a blind eye to because we get oil and, the regional stuff from them. And it's just like, we'll go attack another country for, oh my God, they're mistreating their own citizens, and then give these people, this regime, money. It's been that way for 70 years. There's documentaries about how this is. I think Adam Curtis talked about this in one of his documentaries. I'd highly recommend all of his documentaries. But yeah, this whole thing with Saudi Arabia, it's just been this relationship that we've had, the United States elites at least. So now we have Trump totally up their ass. It's giving them money, the golf course thing that recently happened. And of course, I don't think the Biden administration has a lot to stand on, since they're ass kissing the Saudi regime too. Just like, the Democrats have all these like Chinese operatives that have they've had lovers that were like Chinese operatives and stuff. And then, Republicans have probably had Russians too. And I believe that to some extent. I don't believe in Russiagate, how it was portrayed. But there's obviously, stuff going on with that. And now this Saudi thing with Trump. And the Saudi stuff is worse than anything he was involved with Russia, by the way. I should mention. This has been proven time and time again. There's the people that were bashing Russiagate have always been like, well, that Saudi thing. There's certain people that have watched certain news, some resources that have done. So this is a really bad moment for the truth community. I mean, obviously people like James Corbett and and so forth, or Derek Brosey, people like that, or what's his name, the Last American Vagabond guy. Those people have always been like, yeah, Trump's a fraud, Trump's a fake, it's not true, he's just as corrupt as the rest of them. But it's such a betrayal to the basic premise that a lot of MAGA people do believe, that are also in the truth stuff. It's such a betrayal to them. It's a slap in the face. Think about that if this is true. I'm going to actually watch James Corbett and see what he thinks about this, by the way. But if this is true, this is such a slap in the face with regards to what's going on in our world. This is such a slap in the face. This is such an insult to the people that support the guy. I've never been on board with him. I think sometimes he's funny, unintentionally. I like how he trolls some of the left, sometimes some of the left, not the real left, what I call the real left, or the dirtbag left, like I'm considered sometimes. The actual mainstream liberal establishment left. That's what I mean. I love how he trolls that, and how he just kind of just makes them, embarrasses them. But this is embarrassing for him if this is true. And do I think there will be repercussions from this? I think there will. I think if this is true, if there is any kind of espionage kind of thing brought down, he could be serving jail time this time. I'm serious. I don't believe the FBI, because they're, one of the alphabet organizations that I think should be abolished. But if there is any truth to this, and I'm not saying that there is, then Trump's going to go down. I mean, if there is truth to this narrative that he gave the Saudis nuclear secrets that he wasn't supposed to do or whatnot. I mean, I just mean the whole thing across the board. I don't mean, well, he already had these files that were whatever, these excuses or whatever. I mean, straight across the board, if this is true, then this is the end of MAGA, pretty much. I mean, they can reincorporate and get behind someone like Ron DeSantis, who, I'm not a big supporter of him, but, it's DeSantis has a way of speaking to a lot of what's going on. I'm not a supporter, by the way. He has a way of speaking of what's going on that is very straightforward, that, and people might think he's more establishment than Trump, but I don't, considering the last 2 years, what DeSantis did in Florida, he did stuff that was absolutely, some people probably considered it treasonous, because ignoring the federal government for 2 years in a row, all these guidelines and stuff. You know what I'm talking about, right? Of course. Uh, and I mean, he basically, went the other direction with a lot of that stuff. Not at first, he kind of capitulated for a couple of months, and he's just like, yeah, fuck this. This is not going to work anyways, which it really didn't work, on the macro level. Maybe there was some reduction of whatever, a little bit, like a marginal effect, like I said, and people have a problem with that. I've had friendships that were strained because of that. That's my idea. Even though I'm on the left, I was always opposed to a lot of these mandates and stuff. And I make no apologies about that, because I was scared about when you have people like Jones or like Ike or whoever, even though I'm not like, or Corbett for that matter, especially Corbett, who for the last 15 to 20 years have been making these predictions that come true. Oh, they're making this kind of thing happen, or they're trying to do this here, then of course it's terrifying. And it seems like it's going to come true. Now, a lot of that's been calmed down, thankfully. I don't know if it's because they weren't trying to make these things come true and it was all just, exaggeration, or if it was just because they thought the resistance would be too much, so they're just trying to implement a little bit at a time, or they don't want to do their whole plan, but part of it, they can... It's like a friend says, he's like, it's kind of like haggling over a car or something, like... a salesperson will probably, have give the highest price, and then you haggle them down, and then you meet sort of towards the middle. It's kind of like with these things with the elites trying to get their way with whatever, money and power games they're trying to make. It's like they'll shoot for the stars at first, like they'll try to have the whole enchilada. But then maybe they can have, one enchilada or instead of two enchiladas, one enchilada. I had enchiladas today for lunch in celebration of a lot of things going on right now. Actually, I just felt like doing it. So, yeah, I don't know, what that's all about. But anyways, back to the DeSantis thing. It's like, well, he could be a viable candidate. I think he's still a corrupt Republican stooge, beholden to corporations and the elites. Just like Trump is too, Trump is a wild card to some extent too, and that's probably why they're threatened by him. But, things like this, it's disrespectful towards all this work that people have done. If it's true, I'm just saying, if it's true, hypothetically, and it's going to be impossible to prove, and of course, like the MAGA people say, it's all lie, they'll say it's all lie. That sounds like George W. Bush, actually, not like a southern redneck MAGA person who's not necessarily... That's just a stereotype anyways, but it's like it could be all a lie, from our government. Obviously they've lied about stuff before. They usually don't lie in this certain like doctrinal way that is easily there's a certain way that they lie, the government, where there's still room to maneuver towards the truth somehow. Just the way that they operate. It's just kind of the bureaucratic way that they do things. Like, for example, the last 2 years, you could they're saying this on the news, and this Fauci said this or something. Well, let's look at let's look at what the cat says, and let's look at the this stat or whatever. Oh wait, that was sort of like stretching the truth. I guess you'd call it a lie, but it's like they have all their things covered as far as all their stuff on how to kind of cover it, but you can kind of see where it's a lie. Something like this, if that happens, could they outright just lie without any way of any kind of paper trail to see the truth? I don't know, but it seems very likely, especially considering Saudi Arabia. It's like I could see them lying about, maybe really stretching it about Russia like they did. But Saudi Arabia is a bipartisan country as far as both equally corrupted by it, and also any kind of person with rational thoughts, in my opinion, about how corrupt our government and corporations are, we'll see that Saudi Arabia is problematic. I don't like the word problematic because woke people using it, but it is problematic. a country that's problematic, just for everything that it's involved in. And I could see how maneuvering into this realm, that why would they lie if the government is so beholden to Saudi Arabia? Why would they lie about Trump doing this thing with Saudi Arabia necessarily? And maybe that's the whole trick. I don't know. It's, all these different convoluted ways to think about this, but nevertheless, Trump is no good. Stop thinking he's your savior and he's your, and I watch a lot of right-wing commentators that I laugh my ass off on about, they say a lot of funny stuff. Sticks Hexenhammer, I'll watch his videos. I think he has a lot of good things to say. Some things that are just totally off course, and then he kind of contradicts himself. I don't think he's as hardcore anti-leftist as he says. Sometimes it slips out well, I like the leftists from the early 2000s, stuff like that. That's kind of what I consider myself anyways. But a leftist from the early 2000s. So, I watch Salty Cracker when he says ruh-roh, like Scooby-Doo or whatever, I laugh, I watch, all sorts of channels. I watch, but I watch Kyle Kalinske, and I watch Breaking Points and stuff like that too. So it's not like I have this disdain for the right wing necessarily anymore. I just think that they're misguided as far as having this demagogue of Trump, demagoguery towards Trump, and that's really the problem. And when people say well, he's the best we can do, well, that's a low bar, I mean, Gary Johnson turned out to be a big fucking disappointment, of course, if you're going by the libertarian standard, but it's I think people aren't civically involved enough as it is. So if you had more people running for offices, so if you might get better people, but these people, it's so entrenched with the elites. And of course, that's why Donald Trump was so appealing, because he's this not part of this, not part of the system, so called, but he really is. Any kind of real estate person, a real estate billionaire, supposedly a billionaire. I don't think a billionaire shouldn't even be able to run for office in a way, because it's just they will inherently corrupt the system. So, and I'm not saying that I'm sure of that opinion, I'm just saying I don't know, So I don't think that this Trump demagoguery and this worship of him is very smart on their part. I don't think it's a very intelligent thing, and I think it's kind of gone too far if he actually did this. And of course, I know it's political. They don't want him to run. I know this. I know all the facts. They don't want him to run. Their own bottom line is threatened by him, even if it's a small thing, small way. He's a wild card. They don't want these things in there. They'll accuse him, of all these things that are not true, or exaggerate things that are true. But if this is true, it's doomed for the man. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing if that is the case, because if he is actually, as at least this is more the con artist Trump. The Trump that's sleazy con artist, business tycoon / con man, confidence trickster Trump, which is the better way to think about it anyways, and has been for 5 years. People that think of him as Orange Hitler are just misguided and ignorant and naive. That's the whole problem in the first place. The left that was against Trump thought of it in the wrong way. They did not look at it the right way. And of course, the reason why it became what it was, the whole Trump derangement syndrome thing, is because they went at it the wrong way. So a lot of opportunists and people who manipulated that system of the anti-Trump train, like Liz Cheney and all these scumbags, they took advantage of it and wrote it, even what's his name, the old neocon guy, Bill Kristol. It's why the hell would any die-hard left-winger or liberal want to be associated with someone like Bill Kristol or Liz Cheney or Mitt Romney? I remember Mitt Romney was the guy who was like this. He was kind of similar to Trump in a way, actually probably a little more predatory than Trump, because Trump at least, like, I mean, as far as his businesses go, because Trump at least like had like built stuff, built, or put his name on buildings and shit. Like Mitt Romney was like one of these like financial kind of criminals, like who would take, buy up businesses and drive them to the ground to make a profit and all this stuff, and just horrible stuff. There was a Rolling Stone, I think it was Matt Taibbi that did the Rolling Stone article about him like 10-12 years ago. He's Mitt Romney is a real villain, so when Democrats were starting to like cuddle up to people like Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, Bill Kristol, who else, like Dick Cheney, I mean George W. Bush, just like all these real criminal types, I mean, who should be in, I mean, they should be in jail, a lot of them, they should be in jail. White collar criminal exhibit A, Mitt Romney, for a lot of the stuff he did. Of course, there was all these loopholes and these like workarounds in the law, but if it was a fair world, people like that would be in jail. So was Trump like that as far as a business person? He did a lot of unethical things, probably worked with the mob, in New York, probably did a lot of stuff. It's like Kyle Kalinski's known to say, he's like, if you did real estate business in the 80s in New York, you were involved with the mob on some level. So it's like Trump is plenty of a criminal, but like associating with other criminals just to bring Trump down is stupid, and they focus on the wrong things. If they would have focused on the bad stuff like what I'm talking about with this video, then some of these people wouldn't be able to come along on the train. Like Mitt Romney did plenty of bad stuff. Liz Cheney is a neocon. If you actually focused on the bad stuff in this other way about Trump, rather than, oh, he's a racist who says bad tweets on the internet. If you would have done it the way I'm talking about, then you wouldn't have had all as much support from these people, that because they'd be exposed themselves. But of course not, because you had to go after the more superficial aspects of the Trump phenomenon, and that's the real tragedy here. If this is the end of the era, then that's the real tragedy and an irony, because if he's brought down by this more mundane kind of thing that other people get involved with, that other corrupt politicians have done, I mean, look at in the 80s with Iran-Contra, for example, things like that. If this is just a more mundane thing like that, then it's so ironic, because everybody wanted it to be this big deal to bring down Trump, like this big crime, but it's like a more mundane kind of crime that he did, which is still equally horrible and equally corrupt. So I just watch where your loyalties lie. I don't think any of these politicians have our best interests at heart at this age of the world, And I think like third parties and supporting supporting alternate politicians is probably the best way forward. And if any politicians, just at all, if you decide to, I don't know, it's just it's so hopeless at this point. The Democrat and Republican parties. Like if Trump would have like came into office and appointed Ron Paul and Andrew Napolitano and like various figures like that, instead of like John Bolton, all these people, like I would have like said, okay, well maybe the MAGA crowd is right about Trump. He's anti-establishment, blah blah blah. But the fact of the matter is, he didn't do that either. So I mean, you can see this is kind of a critique of Trump and what happened, but it's just a sad moment if indeed that he is as brazenly corrupt as people have said, and people warned about, but like I said, they didn't put it in the right context. They didn't do it right, and they made themselves look like fools because they were going along with all these other criminals. So for various reasons, and I still think the reason for a lot of that is because, so I mean, it kind of makes sense. It's kind of where does it start? The chicken or the egg? Is it the corrupt people that are jumping on the anti-Trump train, so they focus on the wrong things, or is it because the anti-Trump train is because the elites are threatened by Trump, and even if it's more small little ways here and there, but it adds up, I don't know. But that's about all.